Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Dark Days, Bright Nights, Surviving the Las Vegas Storm Drains by Matthew O'Brien, narrated by Stephen R. Thorne. Introduction. 17 years later, I still recall the scene. I was sitting at my bulky wooden desk in the office of Las Vegas City Life, a now defunct alt-weekly newspaper. It was late afternoon. Thumbing through the Las Vegas Review-Journal in the natural light afforded by a floor-to-ceiling window, I stopped at a story about Timmy T.J. Weber, an accused rapist and double murderer, who had been captured after 3 weeks on the run. The final paragraph of this story, which explained that he had used the underground flood channels to evade the police, captured my imagination. I laid the paper on the desk and wondered what Weber experienced in the tunnels, what he saw, heard, smelled. Did clues pertaining to his crime remain? Could he hear the police dogs howling overhead? I also wondered what lurked beneath Las Vegas. What secrets did the storm drains keep? What discoveries waited in the dark? As the managing editor, I wasn't the person to answer those questions. I was shackled to my desk. Only the most daring and desperate mercenary would accept the assignment I had in mind. So I picked up the phone and pitched the idea of exploring the drains to City Life contributor Josh Ellis, who displayed brass balls in his weekly column and a flair for first-person narratives in his features. To my moderate surprise, he said, "Sure, why not?" A few weeks after he accepted the assignment, I called Josh to see how it was going. He explained how, armed with an 18-inch knife and accompanied by a photographer friend, he'd explored a drain that began downtown and ended at the Las Vegas Wash more than 3 miles away. They didn't encounter anyone, but they did see clothing and sleeping bags hanging in the manhole shafts, storage spaces, they assumed, for homeless people living above ground near the manholes. I asked Josh if he'd explored other drains. He hadn't, but hoped to over the weekend. "I may need a lift," he added. I agreed to pick him up that Saturday morning, stipulating that I'd serve as chauffeur, but I had no intention of entering the drains. However, curious about what lurked beyond the shade line and not wanting to be labeled a cowardly editor, I ended up following him into a pipe in the southeast valley and 2 drains in the southwest. Over the next few months, we explored 3 more drains. The research resulted in a co-written series that was published in City Life in the summer of 2002. It was well received locally and nationally, and went viral before that term entered the lexicon. City Life nominated it for the Pulitzer Prize in feature writing. If that had marked the end of my storm drain saga, I would have been satisfied. But it was only the beginning. Josh and I considered turning the stories into a book, but he was moving to San Francisco. We had different visions for its style and scope, and having heard of married couples who got divorced while working on book projects together, we figured we'd kill each other before completing the manuscript. He passed the project off to me with the understanding that if I got a book deal, I'd cut him in on the advance. Vegas-based Huntington Press commissioned the project, and I gave Josh his share. And in the summer of 2004, I took a sabbatical from City Life and explored the storm drain system on my own. These solo descents provided the foundation for Beneath the Neon, Life and Death in the Tunnels of Las Vegas, which was published in 2007. One reason I wrote Beneath the Neon was to call attention to the fact that people live in the drains. My greatest hope was that a government agency or nonprofit would help them. My worst fear was that the cops would sweep them out. Neither was realized, so in the spring of 2009, I contacted Help of Southern Nevada, a charity that serves the poor and homeless. "I know the drains and the people in them," I explained in an email to Help's management. "You have the resources and know-how. Perhaps we can work together." A few weeks later, I began escorting Help's social workers into the underworld, and Shine a Light, a community project that provides housing, counseling, and other services to those in the drains, was born. Part of Shine a Light's mission is to raise awareness of the people in the drains and advocate on their behalf. One way I've done this is through the media, while of course promoting my book. When Beneath the Neon was released, I reached out to media outlets and received a generous amount of coverage. But within weeks, I no longer needed to contact them. They were contacting me. This was in part due to the recession. The economy tanked, and Vegas became the poster child of the boom and bust. Media from around the world, the ones who still had a job, fixated on Sin City, and during their research, the tunnels would inevitably come up, and they'd request a tour. If they were serious journalists, that is, not tabloid hacks, and willing to make a donation to Shine a Light or buy supplies for the people we interviewed, I'd agree to play Virgil to their Dante and guide them through this inferno. These stipulations scared off some journalists, but most moved forward. Nightline, Dr. Phil, the New York Times, CNN, the BBC, Al Jazeera, Le Monde, and Der Spiegel, they and many more descended with me into the tunnels, though, citing ethics, not all donated to the cause. I visited the tunnels on behalf of Shine a Light and or the media at least once every 2 weeks, and I performed duties related to the community project, communicating with social workers, picking up donations, fielding media requests on a daily basis. This continued until July 2017, when I moved to El Salvador to teach. However, before leaving Las Vegas, I made sure to do 2 things: find a way to keep Shine a Light alive and interview people who made it out of the drains. With support from Shine a Light, Help of Southern Nevada, U.S. vets, and others, several people found their way out of the storm drains and were reintegrating into society. I knew many of them. Some I considered friends. Over coffee, on the phone, or through Facebook, I gathered snippets of their stories about childhood, homelessness, discovering the drains, getting out, and getting clean, and lessons learned. And I was struck by how compelling and inspiring the stories were, and how skilled they were at telling them. I wanted to share what I'd heard. I felt obligated to. Beneath the Neon showed the dark side of homelessness in Las Vegas, people at their lowest, literally and figuratively. It only seemed fair to tell the other side of the story, the happy ending I could never have envisioned when Josh and I first stumbled into the drains. My goal wasn't to talk to everyone who made it out. I wanted diversity in age, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, drug of choice, and length of time in the drains. When I'd done all that I could to reach that goal, I'd interviewed 36 people. The conversations took place between January 2017 and April 2019. I asked each person the same questions in the same order. What's your earliest memory? What was your childhood like? Where'd you go to high school, and what kind of student were you? What did you do after high school? When I finished an interview, which usually took 1 to 2 hours, I'd transcribe it, then schedule the next one. Shortly into the interview process, I realized I had a lot of interesting content, but I wasn't sure how to structure it. I considered monologues, but more than 30 of them? That would be overkill. So which 10 to 15 people would I focus on? There were so many worthy subjects and powerful stories. Looking for guidance, I emailed a handful of writer friends, explaining the project and its structural possibilities. My former City Life collaborator, Josh Ellis, thought a collage of oral accounts might work well, and he loaned me his copy of Please Kill Me, the uncensored oral history of punk, to serve as a model. My book began to take shape. I turned the questions I'd asked the subjects into chapter headings, including the most memorable responses in each chapter, and edited and arranged the stories to give them a narrative flow. Dark days, bright nights, surviving the Las Vegas storm drains is the result. My role with Shine a Light is a middleman of sorts between the people in the drains and those who want to help them. That, essentially, is the role I play in this book. These survivors shared their stories with me, and I'm passing them on to you. The book, however, does not venture to tell 36 individual narratives, but one overarching tale, a tapestry of homelessness in America and life in and out of the tunnels of Las Vegas. I also hope it busts some myths about homelessness and provides a unique perspective on the city. And 25% of the book's proceeds will benefit Shine a Light, which was folded into the Las Vegas Freedom House Sober Living Center when I moved to Central America. What if I had not read the Review Journal on that fateful day in 2002? What if I didn't finish reading the story about Timmy T.J. Weber being captured? Or the reporter had not included the paragraph about Weber's underground escape? I wonder what path my career would have taken and what my life would look like now. The storm drains have become part of who I am, and the former residents have proven to be the most honest and loyal people I've met in Las Vegas, which is more of a compliment to them than a slight to the city. I don't, however, presume to speak for them. As this book attests, they do that quite well themselves. Matthew O'Brien, April 2019. Discovering the Drains, Part 1. To understand the landscape of the Las Vegas Valley, as I explained in my book Beneath the Neon, simply look at the palm of your hand. The mounds on the perimeter of the palm are the mountain ranges surrounding the valley. The concave interior is the basin floor. The lines are flood channels, the more prominent ones primary washes that widen and deepen over time. Like a palm, the valley is enclosed, except for a shallow groove in a bottom corner. The Las Vegas Wash, which marks the basin's lowest elevation, drains through this groove into Lake Mead. Located in the heart of the Mojave, the driest desert in North America, Las Vegas is lethally hot and arid. Its average high temperature in June, July, and August is 102 degrees Fahrenheit. The average yearly rainfall is only 4 inches, most of which falls during the so-called monsoon season, when Vegas is susceptible to flash floods. The asphalt, concrete, and hardpan desert soil absorb little water. The slopes of the basin carry it onto streets and into natural flood channels toward the Las Vegas Wash at speeds exceeding 25 miles per hour. In 1985, after a series of floods crippled Las Vegas, the state legislature created the Clark County Regional Flood Control District. The goal was to reduce flooding by building a network of channels. It was Southern Nevada's first coordinated attempt to control flooding, which had only been done piecemeal by various entities, including Clark County, Las Vegas, and North Las Vegas. Along with the Las Vegas Valley, which grew from a population of 750,000 in 1990 to more than 2 million people, the flood system is constantly expanding. The intricate web spans from mountain range to mountain range, like the lines on a palm, and currently consists of 80 detention basins and 600 miles of channel, roughly half of which are underground. Despite these figures, and the crucial role the drains play in the city's functionality, the flood channels are not a prominent feature of Vegas's landscape or lore. They lie low, in off-the-beaten-path places, blocked off by walls and chain-link fences, or camouflaged by the beige desert floor. Which begs the question, how did you discover the storm drains? Schmaus, 24, a rock musician from the mountains of New Hampshire, had a violent and unforgettable introduction to the drains. I was giving this other homeless guy hot dogs I'd found in a dumpster near Tropicana and McLeod, and out of the corner of my eye, I see this big guy come over and he decks me. The hot dogs go flying. I was stunned. It took me a second to realize I just got hit in the face. He starts wailing on me, and I fight back. I'm not a small guy, so he took off. I had this meat cleaver on me, and I'm chasing him down the street with it. The drug dealers that lived in the shitty apartments nearby knew me. I was a loyal customer of theirs. They were like, "Dude, what's up?" I said, "Get that guy." We're all chasing him, and he dipped through a hole in a fence and went down into a wash and into a tunnel. We all stopped. We're like, "We're not going in there." And that's how I discovered the tunnels. Barry, 48, a sex offender from Howell, Michigan, came to Las Vegas after an 18-year incarceration. In prison, I'd seen that show Modern Marvels on the History Channel, and they talked about the flood channels. So when I got to Vegas, I just walked around town looking for them. Down past the welcome sign, I found one and figured I'd check it out. It was dark, scary. I was wondering who I'd meet. Any decent people, or just rats, spiders, and trash? I had a flashlight on me. I always carry one. That's when I ran into Craig. He'd lived down there a while, and they called him the mayor. He had a wall of plastic up, and I knocked on it and talked to him for a couple minutes. Told him my name, where I was from, what I was in prison for, and his response was, "There's room farther down to make a camp, but don't tell no one what you were in prison for." Manny, 47, a member of the Tlingit Indian tribe in Alaska, lived in the tunnels for 10 years. I knew about the ones by the Rio. Me and a girlfriend had stayed in them when we were young. I didn't mind it because I was with her, and we had one foot in and one out. We were just kids, having fun. But in 2001, I got into a fight. This dude was looking at me, and I was looking at him. Then he started talking shit. I was a young man, and he was an older guy, and I beat him down. I thought that was it. I went to get a drink in Mermaid's Casino, and I come out, and I feel someone crack me from the side with a beer bottle. I stumbled down to Bonneville Avenue. My tank top was soaked with blood. That's as far as I got before I passed out. When I woke up in the hospital, the doctor said, "There's a chance you're going to lose sight in that eye." What are the chances? 99%. I ended up getting several stitches and I lost sight in my left eye. When I was released, I went to a buddy's house, but I didn't want to be a burden and I didn't feel like hustling wearing an eye patch. That's when I went back to the drains. Ricky Lee, 53, lived in the tunnels off and on from 1995 to 2016 and is part ruffian, part poet. I was living in an abandoned hotel, but I was working. I was handing out smut on the strip. The hotel owner would come by every once in a while and kick me out. I told him, "I got a job. How about I pay you for the room?" He said that'd be fine, so I gave him $80 a week. I saw the tunnels being built not far from the hotel, and I had always admired the TV show Beauty and the Beast. That guy Vincent lived in tunnels, and I wanted to do that too. Half Pint, 58, from western Nebraska, got her street name because of her diminutive stature. My first night on the streets, I slept behind a dumpster at 7-Eleven. Then I walked and ended up at Desert Breeze Park. I was so fucked up on pills. I woke up at the park, tied to a bench, half naked. I had no idea what happened. I kept walking, and somebody told me I could go down into this culvert, an open floodplain by the Orleans Casino. There were 3 big tunnels, and I went in the middle one and was immediately met by all sorts of spiders and weird smells. It was really dark, and my eyes had to adjust. I passed out. When I woke, there were other people there. "Hey, you all right? What are you doing here?" One of the guys said, "You can't stay here and puke all over our stuff. Get out of here." I started crying, and he had a moment of sympathy. He said, "You don't look like you belong here." "I don't." I gave him a sob story, and he offered me a crack pipe. Tex, 46, is a funny, friendly Army vet who described his 12 years in the drains with a thick Southern drawl. "When you're in Vegas and homeless, the best thing for you is not to be seen. Vegas doesn't like homeless people, and the police harass you, so I found me a tunnel and made it my home. There's a homeless person on just about every corner. and one of them showed me the spot. Shaggy, 29, was a heroin addict in the tunnels from 2011 to 2014. His mom, One Shoe Sue, also lived in the drains. I was going back and forth by bus between Summerlin and Henderson. It'd take about 3 hours. I'd panhandle and make $100, and I kept my backpack and sleeping bag on me, and I'd crash wherever I landed. Eventually, a few guys from the tunnels saw me panhandling near Eastern Avenue and the 215. They actually challenged me. They tried to get me to move from my spot. They said my time was up, but I wouldn't leave. Later that day, they sought me out and said, "Hey, man, you got heart. You should come down with us where you're safe and out of the way." Stephen, 62, was born and raised in Las Vegas. A longtime waiter and maitre d', he found himself living under Paradise Road near the Hard Rock Hotel. I just woke up one day and was living, or should I say dying, in the tunnels under Paradise. Earliest memory. On any given night in the United States, 568,000 people find themselves without a fixed, adequate residence, according to the Department of Housing and Urban Development's 2019 Annual Report on Homelessness. Of these individuals, 30% are in families with children, 7% are veterans, and 6% are under the age of 25. People of color are overrepresented on the street compared to their numbers in the general population. Native Americans, who make up 1% of the population, are 3% of the homeless. Hispanics, 18% of the population, are 22% of the homeless. And African Americans, 13% of the population, are 40% of the homeless. Despite these sad and sobering statistics, and the high visibility of the homeless in most major U.S. cities, the issue goes largely ignored. What little media attention it garners often lacks depth. Reporters, most of whom have no personal experience with homelessness, tend to tell the story from the perspective of politicians, social service organizations, and individual activists. If they do interview a homeless person, their questions, at best, focus on the immediate past, the present, and the near future. How did you become homeless? How do you survive on the streets? What would it take to get you housed? Precious little coverage, mine included, delves deep into the person's backstory to find clues to help solve the mystery that is homelessness. What's your earliest memory? Describe your childhood and high school years. What did you do after high school? These prompts inform the chapters Earliest Memory, Childhood, and Adulthood. I wondered if there were commonalities in how the interviewees were raised and educated. Was their homelessness foreshadowed? Are there root causes of the issue? In short, I was curious if anything in their background might help explain how they ended up in the storm drains of Las Vegas. Cindy, 50, lived in the drains for 3 years with her husband Rick. An alcoholic and a meth addict, she lost custody of her 5 children and traces a lot of her problems to a tragic early memory. When I was 2, my baby brother fell off the bunk and snapped his neck and died. That haunted me for a long time because I was supposed to be watching him. I considered myself a murderer from that age on. My father committed suicide on my brother's birthday the next year, so I felt like I had killed 2 people by the time I was 3 years old. Four Finger Mike, 61, who lost part of 4 fingers in a middle school shop class accident, recalled one of America's darkest days. My mom took us out of school when John F. Kennedy got assassinated. Mom and Dad had taken me and my sister to the old Las Vegas Convention Center to watch Kennedy speak just 2 months before that. My mom taught at J.D. Smith Middle School, and I was across the street at C.P. Squires Elementary with my sister. And when he got killed, they closed the schools, and my mom came and got us. We went home and watched the news on a black and white TV. Walter Cronkite. Andy, 59, who has a doctorate in organizational behavior and human factors, lived in the drains for 7 years, the last while battling breast cancer. Her earliest memory is also related to JFK's assassination. They were doing the 21-gun salute, boom, 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 and I was glued to the TV. My mother said, "Wouldn't it be funny if a duck fell from the sky?" I turned around and she was standing there with her apron on. I remember thinking, I can't believe she just said that. She had to break the seriousness of the situation, and it was the funniest thing I've ever heard. Becky, 33, lived in the tunnels for 2 years with her boyfriend, Zero. She grew up in Southern California. I guess because I had seen my mom snorting meth, I found some drywall on the carpet and chopped it up on the mirror and made little lines. That was my pretend play. Meth was always in the house. My mom was an addict, and the guy who raised me sold dope, and it just carried over to me. Phil, 47, a former crack addict, lived in the drains for 9 years. An adoption agency. I think I was 4 or 5. I remember sitting in an indoor sandbox, waiting. Eazy-E, 47, lived in the drains for 9 years, like his good friend Phil. He shared a memory that foreshadowed his struggles with meth and alcohol. I was 5 years old, and my new parents had an adoption party for me. It was in Hurleyville, New York, in the middle of August, and it was about 90 degrees and 100% humidity. I was wearing blue Mickey Mouse sunglasses. I remember there was a bottle of beer, Genesee cream ale, and I watched the sweat run down the side of it, and I was thirsty, so I drank some. There was 3 or 4 people around, including my new father, and everybody started laughing, so I finished it. When nobody was looking, I found another and drank it too. My mom and dad found me several hours later in the sandbox, covered in puke and surrounded by beer bottles. I had laid the bottles on their side to try to hide them. I honestly believe my addiction started then, because I even tried to hide the liquor. Murch, 59, got his street name by stealing merchandise, which he often bartered for drugs. He lived in the drains for 10 years, despite an idyllic upbringing in Dayton, Ohio. My father belonged to a Masonic temple. They marched in parades across the country, and I was the mascot. I wore a fez with puffy pants, bright colors, and a sash. I carried a sword and marched with the group. We would do different maneuvers throughout the parade. We marched in Baltimore, Philadelphia, St. Louis, a lot of cities. Manny, a black and white kitten. I threw it off a 2-story building to see if it could fly. It landed on its feet and was fine. I guess I was a hostile child. Misty, 35, grew up in foster homes throughout Oregon, but occasionally lived with her alcoholic mother and her mom's assorted partners. My birth mother had gotten married to this guy, Roger. He used to sit there and take flies and dip them in water, then pour salt on them and watch them try to fly away. There was something really wrong with that dude. Shaggy, waking up in the middle of the night in Arizona. I think it was Phoenix. I was in 1st or 2nd grade. My mom told me to grab what I could, that we were leaving. That was a constant for me and my mom. She was a prostitute and crack addict, and we moved from place to place. Half Pint. I have a lot of memories of being rejected. My dad was a politician for 25 years in Nebraska, and he often went on the campaign trail. Votes counted. I was the kid that went to the grandparents or the babysitters, that didn't usually go campaigning. I had twin brothers that were younger than me. They were the golden children. I remember going to Lincoln for an event and driving 8 hours cross-state, Mom and Dad bitching at me the whole way. "We really need you to be present at this one. Everyone needs to be there." I was fighting with my brothers, and my dad would pull over and beat me. We finally got there, and he looked at me and said, "You're ruining my life. I don't know why we even had you." Melinda, 44, lived in the drains for 2 years with her boyfriend, Manny. An alcoholic, she lost custody of her 5 children and was herself raised by a single mother. Waiting for my mom to come home. I'd hardly see her because she always worked. I missed her and would wait for her early in the morning.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?